It started out so innocently. My wife and I were shopping on Michigan Avenue. Jane was looking for a new outfit for our upcoming 25th birthday party. She had found a beautiful dress and two pairs of shoes to match, but couldn't decide which pair to choose, so I suggested we stop by Gibson's for a drink and get our daughter-in-law's opinion. Jane agreed. After a 2-hour shopping trip, she was ready for a drink, and it would be nice to surprise Taylor since we hadn't seen her in a while. We assumed that Taylor, that's our sister-in-law, would be working today, as she usually tried to take the Saturday shift. She claimed that tipping on Saturday is always better. Our son Paul was out of town last week. He was gathering testimony and information related to a court case he is working on. Paul works for the district attorney's office, and although he wasn't allowed to go into details, he hinted that the case is related to the Russian mafia, and he's been talking to several former members who were in the Federal Witness Protection Program. Jane and I caught a cab for the short ride to Rush Street. It was only 6 blocks away, but Jane's legs were pumping. Jane just has to wear 10-inch heels when she stores on Michigan Avenue. Something about looking appropriate. I've been married long enough to know to keep my mouth shut and not point out the lack of logic in her shoe choices. The cab dropped us off in front of the restaurant. It was noon, so this had to be the slowest time of Taylor's shift. With any luck, we'd be able to chat for a few minutes while enjoying cocktails and appetizers. When I opened the restaurant door for Jane, I immediately spotted Taylor at the back of the bar. She was hard to miss, as she was 175 centimeters of Scandinavian beauty. Taylor was talking to another waiter, but there was some intimacy in their posture that set off alarm bells in my head, including the fact that Taylor's hand was resting on the waiter's shoulder. The maitre d' wasn't at the entrance when we walked in, so we stood there for a full minute. During that minute, I kept my eyes on Taylor. I was a little surprised at the way they were looking at each other. I looked at Jane to see if she had the same reaction. I asked the maitre d' for a table in Taylor's section, and after Taylor stepped away, I finally took my eyes off the other waiter. Heading towards our table, she sported her charming waitress smile, which disappeared the second she recognized us and was replaced with an expression of shock and concern. "Mom, Dad, what a surprise!" Taylor's voice was a little strained, and she was clearly trying to put a smile back on her face. Jane answered her. "Taylor, we just came by for a drink and to get your opinion on some shoes. We've been shopping for a few hours now, and we both need a drink." "The usual? You, Dad, a Basil Hayden neat, and Mom, a Grey Goose Rocks? That'll be great. Plus one of those cheese plates, please. There's no rush, Taylor." "How did you spend this week while Paul was out of town?" I asked. "I've been very busy and very lonely. I miss Paul, and I hope he comes home soon. Work has been okay. I'm training Carlo, the new waiter." Taylor looked at Carlo when she said this, and much to her disappointment, Carlo winked, noticing her look. Taylor ran off saying, "I'll get you some drinks," and most likely told Carlo to chill in the presence of her husband's relatives. Carlo gave us a quick glance and headed for the kitchen. I took advantage of Taylor's absence to ask Jane. "Babe, I know I'm a little suspicious with my past, so tell me what you saw there." "Mark, you're suspicious for a reason. I saw the same thing you did. And I'm not going to let Taylor break our son's heart. She's a little nervous, and she seemed a little too comfortable with the new guy." "Do you think I should call your Uncle Teddy?" Teddy was Jane's uncle, who had retired from the Chicago Police Department a few years ago and was working in the security industry. Jane's family on her father's side, the Summers, were all police officers, and on her mother's side, Simoncelli, were connected to the Sicilian Mafia. This made for some interesting family get-togethers. "Yeah, why not call my uncle and ask him for a drink?" Taylor came back with our drinks and sat with us for a while, since there were only a few other customers. When Carlo came to the table to bring our appetizer, I took the opportunity to introduce myself and talk to him a bit. It was obvious that Carlo's first language was not English. It took me a couple questions before I learned that he was from Italy, had worked here while studying at Loyola. Jane and I finished our drinks and most of the cheese before heading home, where I called Uncle Teddy. Mark Davis's story. You may think I'm paranoid. Why do I have this unpleasant impression of two co-workers talking during a break in the workday? It has to do with how my first marriage ended. Marriage to Paul's birth mother. Her name was Claire. probably still is, if she's still alive. We hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since she showed up at Paul's high school graduation. I married Claire right out of college. She was the bartender at the tavern where our group hung out. She was the most beautiful, well-built woman I'd ever met, and as a perfect example of thinking with my little head, I started dating her as soon as she showed interest in me. I'm not a bad guy, but I'm sure her attraction to me had more to do with the fact that I was a grad student in college, and she had probably heard about my trust fund. I always had a wad of cash on me, and I always tipped bartenders, especially the pretty ones, more than the standard rate. Claire agreed to my date, fucked me half to death on our first night together, and accepted my proposal for the rest of the semester. My parents tried to talk me out of marrying her, but of course I was much smarter than they were. I think it was Mark Twain who said he was surprised at how much his own father had learned in the 7 years between Twain's 18th and Twain's 25th birthday. Or something like that. Whoever said that and whatever he said, it applied to me in those years of my life. Fortunately, my grandfather took very specific measures when he set up trust funds for my brother and me. They included no access to the funds until our 30th birthdays and requiring a prenuptial agreement before any marriage. Even without $500,000 in trust funds, I was still very wealthy. As long as I got good grades, my parents gave me an excellent allowance. And thanks to my parents' connections, I had a fantastic job waiting for me to graduate with an MBA. I graduated. Claire signed a prenup. I'm pretty sure she was high when she signed it, but the notary didn't seem to notice anything because the whole time he was trying to look under Claire's blouse and see her bare breasts. And we got married in Vegas at my parents' house with mild objections. I won't say the whole marriage was terrible. In fact, without giving Jane much trouble if she reads this, I'd say the sex was exciting. Even though Claire and I had been having sex since our first date, she was putting out her best during that week in Vegas. Claire spent every day topless in the pool, wearing the smallest bikini she could find. In fact, one afternoon she befriended a young flight attendant who loaned her a Wicked Weasel swimsuit she'd bought in the Caribbean. I was sitting in my poolside lounger when the two of them came down from Beth's room. Claire took off her disguise, and I nearly choked on my beer. All she was wearing was a small pair of panties with a string in the back. "Are we going to get kicked out of here?" I asked. "If anyone complains, I'll put another one on," she replied. No one complained, but Claire and Beth spent that day and the next laughing at all the men who found reasons to pass by flaunting their boners under their suits. In the evening, Claire was no less of an exhibitionist. She wore either her tightest jeans with some risque top, never a bra underneath, or some version of a little black dress that barely covered her ass and breasts. One night, she came out of the bedroom in a red silk dress that was almost obscene, complemented by a pair of red-heeled shoes high enough for her to look right into my eyes. My height is 180 centimeters and Claire was 170 centimeters. "Where are we going when you're dressed like that?" I asked. "You'll see," was all she replied. As we walked through the lobby, I enjoyed seeing men and a few women turn their heads as Claire walked by. We got into a cab. Claire handed the cabbie a note, and we headed out into the Vegas nightlife. We stopped in front of a strip club. Claire got out of the cab while I paid the cabbie. He grinned, thanked me for the good tip, and wished me a good time. I'd only been to a couple strip clubs in the Midwest before that night. The girls usually looked somewhere between a 5 and 8 point. Very few of them danced with real enthusiasm and never without at least a thong to hide their dignity. Vegas was different. Where did all these beautiful women come from? Sure, I know that some or maybe most of them had enhancements, but if so, the operation was top-notch. Claire smiled broadly at me as I looked up at the stage and saw two completely naked beauties there, each swinging on a pole. "Like this?" she asked. Claire pulled up the skirt of her dress to reveal a garter around her upper thigh. From behind the garter, she pulled out a couple $100 bills. "Tonight is my treat for you," and she treated me the same way. I had 3 lap dances that night. I used all my willpower to keep from grabbing each dancer's breasts or ass with my hands. 2 hefty bouncers who look like they belong on the defensive line are a strong deterrent. As hot as my private dances were, I almost ended up in my pants from a private dance that Claire bought for herself. Either the bouncers weren't watching or they give the ladies a little more leeway because Claire kissed the dancer's breasts twice. After Claire's private dance, we headed back to the hotel. I wanted to go up to our room immediately, but Claire wanted another drink. We sat in the living room and Claire tried her best to continue teasing us. "What did you like tonight?" she whispered in my ear. "You mean besides my beautiful wife dressed in the tightest dress I've ever seen? Or two naked women twirling on poles with the grace of ballerinas? Or maybe, just maybe, I most enjoyed watching you lap dancing and getting away with kissing her breasts. I did better than that." With those words, Claire took her middle finger and rubbed it under my nose. It smelled like sex. "I bet you $100 she'd had sex with someone in the last few hours." "Damn it, Claire, how long are you going to tease me here? I want to. What I don't understand is how can you stand it? Don't you need to get laid after all this teasing?" "Who says I haven't been had?" Claire said this while looking me straight in the eyes and playing with the top of my thigh. "Remember when I went to the bathroom while you were doing the third private dance? Did you ever wonder why I was gone so long, or did you just like that brunette so much that you didn't miss me?" "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my husband was having so much fun with the brunette that he didn't notice his wife was gone long enough to have sex in the men's room with that handsome black gentleman who was sitting at the next table." I was having a hard time digesting Claire's confession. Had she continued to tease me, or had she really just slept with another man and given me the horns within 4 days of our wedding? Oh, poor Mark. Your face tells me you want this to be a lie? If you ever cheat on me, I will divorce you so fast it will make you dizzy. Now let's go upstairs. If you sleep with someone, this marriage is over before it even starts. We can get divorced in Vegas almost as easily as we can get married. Claire looked mortified, but didn't argue when I took her hand and practically dragged her to the elevator and down the hallway again to our room. She probably had 3 or 4 finishers before I let my feelings get the better of me a second time. We lay in each other's arms. I played with her blonde hair with one hand and her ass with the other. It had been a great night, but I felt I had one last thing to say before we fell asleep. "I'll accept the teasing, but remember what I said. If I ever catch you cheating, it's over between us." I know it's not the most romantic thing a husband can say to his wife after making love, but Claire needed to know how I felt about adultery. We probably conceived Paul that night, or at least one of the mornings, afternoons, or evenings of our week in Vegas, because 6 weeks later, Claire was holding one of those pregnancy test strips in her hand, and it was showing positive. I was thrilled to be having a baby, and Claire seemed happy too. At least she never once said a negative word. We were financially secure with my income. We agreed that Claire could be a stay-at-home mom. Claire's pregnancy went off without a hitch. Paul was born in December, and yes, he was definitely my son. Claire wasn't a great mom, but she was a good mom to Paul. One of our biggest disagreements during the last part of Claire's pregnancy was whether Paul would breastfeed. Claire adamantly refused to consider the issue, and after all, you can't force a woman to breastfeed her child. After Paul's second birthday, Claire wanted to go back to work. Her only profession was bartending. As a compromise, I insisted no diner or lounge. She had to find an upscale restaurant to work in, or it was impossible. Claire agreed to my demands, and 3 months later was hired at one of the best lunch clubs in town. My mom and Claire's mom watched Paul for a few hours when our work schedules overlapped. I thought we had a good marriage. I really loved Claire and thought she felt the same way. After Claire started working, there were no obvious signs of problems. We started spending less time together, but I thought that was temporary until Claire got pregnant again. Unfortunately, there was a snake hiding in the grass, and its name was Neil. Claire and Neil worked together at the restaurant. I met him a couple times when I was sitting at the bar, which I did sometimes just to spend a few extra hours with my wife. I had never seen anything between them that would alert me, so that fateful day when I walked into our house came as a surprise. The house was spotless, and the kitchen was filled with the aroma of my favorite dish. I kissed Claire and gave Paul a high five. "What did I do to deserve this?" I asked. Claire's answer was like a fist punch to my chest. "Mark, this isn't easy to say, but I'm leaving tonight with Neil. We're going to California. Neil has a part in a TV show and he wants me to be there with him." I can't say for sure, but I think I just sat there for a few minutes, shifting my gaze from Claire to Paul and back again. I finally shook the cobwebs off my head. "You're not taking Paul." "God, no! Paul is staying with you. He's better off here with you and our parents. There's no way I can take care of him while I'm working there, and Neil has no interest in being a parent." I couldn't take it anymore and started yelling. "You fucking bitch! You fucking whore! How can you do this to us? How can you abandon me and your son? What the hell did I do to deserve this shit?" "You didn't do anything, Mark. But the first time Neil fucked me, I knew we were done. You always said you'd divorce my ass if I ever cheated on you." At that moment, I realized that our almost 3-year-old son had been exposed to some of the most obscene language coming out of his parents' mouths. Paul sat at the table with a frightened expression on his face. I picked him up and sat him down in front of the TV. I turned on a Disney movie with the sound turned up loud, kissed him on the top of his head, and went back into the kitchen. Claire didn't move. "What's so magical about this asshole that you have to leave your family?" "Don't ask, Mark. You don't want to know." I had enough self-control to keep from screaming. "No, I really want to know. You never seemed disappointed in our lovemaking. You never complained. What's his secret method of stealing wives from their husbands?" Turns out I shouldn't have asked, because her answer triggered my visions for months afterward. "Let's just say, yeah, Mark, you're pretty big down there, but Neil is a monster and I'm starting to like it." "So that's it? You're leaving us for this? Hell, I'll buy you one of those brand new giant imitators at Lover's and you can stay here and raise your son." "Mark, this is going nowhere. I withdrew half the money from our accounts and I have 2 packed bags in my car. I won't need my winter clothes in LA, so just give them to charity. I'll let you know where I land in LA, but you still have my cell phone number in case of an emergency." I was still in shock and didn't snatch the rock from her left hand before she walked into the TV room. She hugged Paul, kissed him, and just walked out the door like that. The next day, I woke up my foggy brain and began to separate our lives. Canceled credit cards, closed joint accounts, and contacted a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. All the usual nonsense. Claire was in Los Angeles with Mr. Big. Months later, my recovery slowed down a bit when I saw the asshole one night while channel surfing. I wondered how Claire took the fact that Neil's character was in bed with some beautiful actress and they were simulating sex. I didn't handle it well at all. I stopped watching the channel because 2 people were in bed together and I hadn't had sex in months. Then I realized Neil was a man in bed, and to top it off, he was in bed with some blonde actress who could have been Claire's twin. Talk about bad timing! I turned off the TV, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, and sent thoughts of bad karma west to Los Angeles. I also enrolled Paul in daycare that he could attend during my work hours. Claire's mom offered to watch Paul for free, but I was so pissed off at the time that I refused out of spite. I allowed her parents to take Paul out for day trips on weekends, but never let him stay overnight. You can call me petty, but they raised Claire, and I somehow reconciled my actions based on Claire's betrayal. My mom and dad didn't come right out and say, "I told you so," but they took a perverse pleasure in what happened next. It seems that Dad, in the interest of protecting his grandson, took the liberty of hiring a private investigator in Los Angeles to follow Claire and Neil. It was then that we learned that they were using cocaine with some regularity. He also documented their sex parties. I guess Claire didn't mind sharing, and apparently Neil didn't care either. The private investigator made sure the couple was arrested for drugs. It was only a misdemeanor, but the conviction and the sex party photos would be enough to paint Claire as an unfit mother if she ever changed her mind and tried to get Paul back. It was in Paul's kindergarten class that I met my second wife, Jane. Jane was a teacher at the school and took a special interest in Paul. As you might expect, Paul had a difficult time adjusting to the divorce and near separation from his mother. Jane's patience and guidance helped Paul overcome his emotional reaction to her departure. I gradually got to know Jane during our weekly half-hour conference call to discuss Paul's progress. Naturally, as the weeks passed, Jane and I eventually started talking about ourselves. Jane began asking me questions to determine how I was responding to Paul's problems. One afternoon, I switched roles and simply asked, "What about you, Miss Summers? What are you attracted to?" Jane briefly told me what had happened. As a teenager, she developed a tumor that required surgery, making her unable to have a child. After graduating from high school, she seriously considered becoming a nun and was actually a novice for 6 months before returning home to go to college with the goal of becoming an elementary school teacher. In the middle of her freshman year, she changed her mind and focused on early childhood education, and has worked at that school for the past 6 years. I decided to go all in. What about your personal life? Any serious boyfriends? Jane looked at me and said nothing, as if considering how to respond to my invasion of her privacy. Oh, I thought to myself, this is where she tells me she's a lesbian or just doesn't like men. But Jane smiled instead. I dated, but never got into any long-term serious relationships. There was one guy in college, but he really wanted to have kids, and that became the focus of the relationship. I was encouraged. Could you let me take you out to dinner sometime? It would be nice to get to know you better and thank you for all you have done for Paul. Seeing Paul smile and laugh is all the reward I need. But if you want to have dinner together, the answer is yes. That Friday night dinner started a beautiful friendship that grew into a beautiful romance. Paul loved Jane, my parents loved Jane, I loved Jane, but most of all, Jane loved Paul and me. We were married within a year. Perhaps someday I'll write more about our courtship and marriage, but if I do, it can be found in the romance section. Over the next few years, we heard less and less from Claire, and I finally asked Claire if Jane could adopt Paul. I flew out to LA with the paperwork to discuss it face to face. It was the first time we had really talked since the night she left, and I took the opportunity to get some answers. Tell me why, Claire. I can't believe you left for the reason you gave that night. No, and I'm sorry I hurt you like that. We were married too young, Mark. At least I was too young. You know, I was crazy when we met, and I thought our love would change me, but it didn't. And then I had a baby while still struggling with the whole forever thing. It was all too much. I thought work would help me get out and be with adults, but Neil showed up and I screwed up by letting him blow dust in my eyes. I didn't say a word as Claire spoke, but she could see the pain in my eyes. You really shouldn't be sad, Mark. You and Paul will be better off without me, and much better off with Jane in your life. Claire and I spent another half hour talking. She signed the authorization to adopt Paul, and I kissed her goodbye. To this day, I still can't understand how a mother can let go of her child. I think the drugs had a lot to do with her downward spiral. However, we were all shocked at the level of her fall when Claire showed up at Paul's high school graduation. Neil was long gone by then. Claire was accompanied by a guy who made Iggy Pop look good against. Claire was a skeleton of her former self. I felt sorry for Paul, and especially for Claire's parents. How sad to see your daughter wither away. Once again, Jane's love and attention helped Paul through this nightmare. I have to admit that there were times when I asked God why he didn't allow a woman like Jane to have children of her own. Whether God answered me or not, I have come to realize that Jane not only raised Paul to be the wonderful young man he is today, but that hundreds of children have benefited from Mrs. Davis's preschool classes. Ted Summers and Vincent Simoncelli. Two good men worth knowing. Uncle Teddy wasted no time. Early Thursday morning, a week after my Saturday evening call, Teddy knocked on our front door. He sat down across from Jane and me. I handed him a beer and held my breath. Teddy began. Well, I'll give you the good news first. Taylor didn't do anything with Carlo Barzino. I let the air out of my chest. Jane squeezed my hand at the same time. I think it's time to intervene. There was a little flirting going on between them, and Carlo is a professional charmer. Legally, we couldn't tap Taylor's phone, but based on Carlo's contacts with some questionable individuals who are already under surveillance, my friends at the police department got a court order to wiretap Carlo. He called her a couple times this week. He pretended to ask her advice about her friend. Taylor was friendly on the phone and tried to give him advice on how to handle his relationship, which, by the way, doesn't exist. But Taylor didn't take him up on any of his offers to meet outside of work. So here's the bad news. The Russian mob tried to get something out of Paul but couldn't find any dirty laundry on him, so they're trying to come at it from the other side. Apparently the Russians found out about Paul's mother, Claire, becoming a whore. They use Carlo, who has a very unsavory reputation as a first-class gigolo, to get something out about Taylor. Then they'll either blackmail Paul or believe it will turn Paul into a weakling when he finds out that his wife has turned into as big a whore as his mother. You've got to be kidding me. They think this is gonna work? Well, my sources say there's an Interpol report that tells how it worked once before. There was a prosecutor in Europe who went ballistic when he was shown pictures of his wife sleeping with several men at the same time. The man went crazy and walked into a local Russian social club with a gun. He fired a couple shots before he was subdued. A couple people were injured. No one died, but the investigation was suspended and the whole case was hushed up. I know it sounds too bizarre to be true, but what's the old saying about facts being stranger than fiction? Anyway, this is the story my friends in the police force told me. The Russians seem to think they can repeat their scenario here. Okay, if that's what's going on, what do we do? First, call Taylor to tell her what's going on with Carlo. Second, get rid of Carlo, because he's probably desperate for Paul to come home next week. So far, he hasn't committed any crime, so the police can't get involved. And, as a retired police officer, I can't be involved in his disappearance or I'll lose my pension or maybe worse. Jane, call your mother's brother Vin. It's his case. Teddy was suggesting that Jane's Uncle Vincent handle Carlo, which got me thinking. Uncle Ted? What if Carlo's connected to the Sicilians? The Sicilians and the Russians are working together. It's not gonna happen, Mark. These guys hate each other. Carlo is strictly speaking a freelance gigolo. He must have known when the Russians hired him that he was playing with fire. If Vin makes him disappear, there'll be one less piece of shit in town. Ted finished his beer, stood up, kissed his niece on the cheek, and walked out the door, saying, "Good luck. Let me know when it's over." It was time to act fast. It was Thursday, and Paul was due home the following Tuesday or Wednesday, so it seemed logical that Carlo should do his play that weekend before Paul got home. I called Vincent and asked if we could stop by right away. Jane called Taylor and asked her to come over tonight. Neither Jane nor I had ever asked Uncle Vin for a favor before. I knew he loved his niece, but he and I had never really been close. Did he like my son, who wasn't really a blood relative enough to help with the problem? And what about the Russians? Could Vincent's involvement have triggered some kind of gang war? The wedding day scene from The Godfather and those questions were running through my head as we sat in his office and told him what we'd learned from Ted. Okay, tell Taylor to take Carlo up on his offer to meet. I'm assuming he'll try to meet Saturday night after work. He'll pour her a couple drinks and, if necessary, slip a date rape drug into her drink and then take advantage of the situation. I know this Carlo. He came to us looking for a job and we turned him down because of his reputation. It doesn't surprise me that the Russian mafia grabbed him. Hard cases have no respect for respectable women. I had to ask, is this going to cause problems between you and the Russians? No, that's why they're using an outsider. They think we're too stupid to connect the dots between them, Carlo and my grandnephew. When Vincent said grandnephew, my eyes went wide and he noticed the look on my face. Mark, I know we haven't discussed this. You married my niece, the sweetest girl I know. If I were lucky enough to have a daughter, I would pray that she grows up to be as beautiful inside and out as Jane. I looked at Jane and she blushed. Vincent continued, and I would pray that she would be lucky enough to find the love that Jane found with you and your son. I pay attention to these things. I know you two have what few couples have, and I thank you for sharing that with my niece. Go home, talk to Taylor and tell her to go out with that clown Saturday night after work. Nothing will happen to Taylor. I guarantee it. With those words, Uncle Vincent stood up, shook my hand, and kissed Jane on the top of her head as he hugged her. Without a doubt, both uncles loved her as if she were their own daughter. As hard as it was to ask Uncle Vincent for help, the hardest part was yet to come. Taylor was supposed to show up that evening. She seemed more relaxed than she had the previous Saturday afternoon. When we opened the door, she kissed us both and sat down to dinner. I hoped that was a good sign. Jane took the lead. Taylor, it's not easy to say this, but Mark and I were disturbed by what we saw on Saturday. Is there something going on between you and this Carlo guy? Taylor reacted sharply to Jane's questioning. Mom, how could you think that? Please, Taylor. I never insulted your intelligence. Don't insult mine. It was quite obvious that you two shared a moment, even without any obvious physical affection, when Mark and I entered the restaurant. And you were too excited when you realized it was us to claim complete innocence. And even if you didn't think you were having an emotional affair, it was obvious that Carlo thought you were. Taylor cried when Jane finished. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. I swear, nothing happened except for some light flirting. I was embarrassed about what you saw on Saturday. I would never do anything to hurt Paul. Carlo tried to talk me into going out with him, but I kept turning him down. I admit that during work hours I let him be more flirtatious than I should have been. He has a way of making it seem innocent. But please believe me when I tell you that there was never any physical intimacy between us, and I never led him to believe that we could be anything more than just friendly co-workers. Now it was my turn. Considering how wound up Taylor was, I had to be careful with the next phase of this intervention. Well, hold on to your hat, young lady, because you haven't heard everything yet. I proceeded to tell Taylor about the Russians and what Carlo was really up to as a gigolo, about the incident in Europe and how she fit into the storyline. If I hadn't talked to Jane's uncles directly, I would have had a hard time believing it, so I wasn't surprised when Taylor asked if we were making the whole thing up to scare the hell out of her. Jane, call Uncle Ted and let Taylor hear it for herself. With Uncle Ted on the line, we watched Taylor get more and more upset as Ted confirmed what we told her. When she hung up, I handed her a glass of brandy. Taylor took a big sip from the glass and looked a little better. What should I do now? Should I quit my job? I answered her. No, but what we're about to ask of you could be very difficult. First of all, and please forgive me for this question, do you swear that nothing happened between you and Carlo? I'm sorry, but it all depends on your answer. Taylor had tears in her eyes as she answered. Please believe me, Dad. I've never had anyone but your son since the day we swore our love to each other and became exclusive. If I were that kind of woman, I wouldn't have married Paul. I know how hurt he was when his birth mother abandoned the two of you, and I couldn't claim to love a man and do that to him. I want what you two and my parents have, a lifelong partnership with your other half, and for me, that's Paul. Taylor, that means so much to me. With that being said, if you agree, here's what we need you to do. We've hired a couple private investigators to follow you for the next few days. We expect Carlo to ask you to meet him for a drink before Paul gets home, most likely after work on Saturday night. Accept his invitation. To this, Taylor started shaking her head no and looking at me as if I'd lost my mind. It's okay, Taylor. Make sure it's a very crowded place to meet. No apartments in other private neighborhoods. Detectives will be in the neighborhood. Before you even take your first sip, detectives will intervene. I didn't tell Taylor that the detectives were actually connected to Uncle Vincent. If she guessed, she had the good sense to leave it at that. When the detectives intervened, one of them would put you in a cab, and they'd take you right here. I also didn't tell Taylor that there wasn't actually a driver in the cab. It was another one of Vincent's employees. We didn't want to take any chances. As expected, Carlo called Taylor on Friday and asked if she wanted to have a drink with him after work on Saturday. He laid it out straight, saying he needed her feminine insight after being dumped. He acted like his heart would break if he couldn't share his grief with Taylor because he liked and respected her. Being Italian, he said that he needed to know why American women didn't find him worthy or attractive. Taylor tried her best to sound sympathetic and agreed to have a drink with him on Saturday. Taylor got to work late on Saturday, missing the first half of her shift. She told us that there was no way she could handle it, working side by side with Carlo for a full 10-hour shift. At 11 p.m., Taylor's cab pulled into the driveway. She walked through the door, sat on the couch, and cried on Jane's shoulder. Thankfully, the ordeal was over. Epilogue. Sunday afternoon, we went to dinner at Jane's parents' house. I wasn't surprised when Uncle Vin showed up. I could smell the lasagna and garlic bread in the oven and saw 2 bottles of Sicilian Red on the table. After dinner, he invited Jane and me to the back porch. As Uncle Vin enjoyed a cigar and we all drank our after-dinner Strega, he told us he had taken care of everything. Apparently, 2 of Uncle Vin's guys convinced Carlo to leave the bar after Taylor left. I assume the firearms and threats were part of the persuasion since none of the other bar patrons paid attention. Carlo was found in possession of a date-rape drug and ecstasy. Carlo was taken to a storage unit and sang like a bird while being videotaped. Carlo told everything, including where he intended to take Taylor after he drugged her. Uncle Vin's two other guys went to the hotel room where they found the three miscreants waiting for Carlo and Taylor. 2 cameras on tripods were ready for the event. Taylor was very lucky that night. The 3 men in the hotel were found the next day with gags in their mouths and tied to chairs. All of them would live, but without the use of fingers and toes for months and extensive rehabilitation. Carlo would never be found. Taylor stayed with us until Paul came home on Wednesday. It was an emotional evening. Paul was told everything except Uncle Vincent's role in Carlo's disappearance. Paul is a litigator and some things can't be shared. We argued that Carlo must have skipped town to avoid incurring the wrath of the Russians because of his failure to seduce Taylor. We know Paul is smarter than to believe that, but he's also smart enough to know when not to ask questions. Taylor held her breath as she told Paul about the flirting that was going on between her and Carlo, however innocent it was. The moment diffused considerably when Paul said that if every couple divorced because of some workplace altercation, there wouldn't be many marriages left. In fact, he said, he had to admit that he and Sandra Miller, one of the other attorneys in the office, occasionally flirted with each other. We all laughed when Taylor reacted to his confession. "Tell that bitch to stay away from my husband!" Taylor immediately blushed when she realized what she had said. Paul told his boss about the conspiracy, and let's just say that it didn't help the Russians' case one bit. It seems the Russians were also trying to ambush a female lawyer working on the case in Paul's office. She put 2 and 2 together when she found out about Carlo and Taylor. The young man she had recently started dating was trying to get her involved in a local swingers club. It was all too much of a coincidence, and she immediately dumped the guy. The full might of the feds, state, and local law enforcement agencies came down on the Russians. All of Paul's co-workers had a very vague idea of what the Russians had planned for the 2 of them. And if that wasn't enough, it seems a Sicilian acquaintance of ours sent word that if his nephew or his nephew's wife were ever harmed, all bets were off. At our 25th anniversary party, I saw Teddy and Vincent talking in the corner. I didn't bother them, but I really wished I could have been a part of that conversation. Shortly afterward, Taylor quit her job. She spent her time preparing the children and volunteering at the daycare center. We were surprised to learn that she was carrying twins. The twins were born last month, and yes, they are definitely my son's babies. Ken Jennings and I, Brian Davidson, were almost inseparable when we were kids. We lived not far from each other, and my dad and his mom were brother and sister. They were each other's favorite brother and sister. My aunt and uncle were friendly and fun, so our families got together often. Although all 6 cousins were close, 3 for each family, the closest were Ken and me. As is almost always the case, Ken and I eventually drifted apart, mostly due to geography, as Ken's family moved 3,000 kilometers away when we were both 11. We were both single for a year. Eventually, we got used to it and still socialized whenever we could. We got together for 3 family reunions before we both headed off to college. While attending college on opposite coasts, we kind of lost touch. Since Ken was still single and had plenty of vacation time saved up, despite living 3,000 miles away, he was able to attend my wedding to Carol the year after Carol and I graduated from college that same year. In fact, he was even one of my best men and arrived the week before the wedding. It was great to get close to him again. He lived at my parents' house since the wedding was in the town we grew up in for the first 11 years of our lives, so I saw him often in the days before the wedding. I was sure that Carol was the love of my life. She was good-looking, funny, smart, and didn't have any difficult personality traits or issues that I was able to spot in the 3 years we dated, 2 in college and 1 after. She liked to have a good time, but she wasn't an unbridled or pushy flirt and wanted to eventually have kids and live off the grid like I did. Ken and Carol seemed to get along just fine until our bachelor and bachelorette parties ended, every 2 days before the wedding. Then Ken seemed reserved around her. Since I had so much to do in the last 2 days before the wedding, I never asked him about it. Unfortunately, things didn't work out with Carol and me. In a situation too trivial to be considered real, after we had been married for 2 years, I got a stomachache one fall Sunday at a professional soccer game and left before halftime to return to our two-bedroom apartment. I found her in our bed with Jeremy, one of her co-workers whom I had dated a couple times. Since I was already nauseous, the shock of seeing them drove me over the edge, and I could tell I was going to throw up. Once I realized this, I directed my vomit at the two of them as they were in the midst of having sex in the missionary position. The first volley of vomit hit Carol, who had her eyes closed, right in the face, and Jeremy on the arm. The second volley hit Jeremy in the side and back of his head. He hadn't had time to turn to face me yet when he heard Carol scream. The third round hit them both and ended their little sexual tryst. If I hadn't felt so bad, both from the stomach issues and from seeing the love of my life sleeping with another guy in my bed, I might have found it amusing, or done some other physical damage to one or both of them. Instead, I just collapsed on the floor, wanting to die right now. I think I even lost consciousness for a while, though I did hear noisy activity and a series of "oh shit" and some sort of crying or screaming. I couldn't distinguish them, given my condition at the time. After an indeterminate period of time, my ability to think fully returned to me, and I stood up. Neither Jeremy nor Carol was in sight. I took off my clothes, which I had also thrown up a bit on, right in our bedroom and left them on the floor next to the vomit-stained bed. I then went to our second bathroom and took a shower before climbing into bed in the guest bedroom, again wishing I was dead. I was physically and emotionally exhausted and fell asleep at about 3 in the afternoon and didn't wake up until 7 Monday morning. Even though my stomach had now calmed down enough that I could work, I seemed sick and took the day off because emotionally I was at my limit. Fortunately, Carol wasn't home Monday morning. I moped around for a few hours, gathering some of my clothes and accessories, packing them into a couple suitcases with the intention of finding another place to live. We only had 6 weeks left on our apartment lease, and obviously I wasn't going to renew it. I would let the landlord know as soon as I felt a little better. Around 10 in the morning, my cell phone rang. Caller ID said it was Tiffany, Carol's maid of honor at our wedding and someone I got along well with, though I thought she was immature for a 25-year-old girl. "Brian here," was my stellar greeting. Tiffany didn't beat around the bush. "Brian, Carol is here and she feels terrible." "Why is that, Tiff?" I replied. She didn't like being called Tiff, but at that point, any friend of Carol's was my enemy. Well, because of yesterday," she mumbled, stammering. "What about yesterday? You don't mean she slept with some jerk in my bed while I was at a soccer game, do you?" She seemed to be enjoying herself, so what was so terrible about it? Tiff stammered. She certainly hadn't gotten a degree in public speaking from the Justice College. She wants to come over and talk to you about it, but she's afraid you'll get really mad. Maybe I could come too," she continued. Despite my depression and the remnants of my stomach problems, I thought quickly. "Sure, Tiff. Why don't you and her come over Wednesday night, say around 7? I really don't want to see her before then, so I hope she can stay with you tonight and Tuesday night." Tiff seemed surprised by my willingness. Okay. Let me ask Carol." I heard some mumbling in the background, and then in a raspy voice, Tiff said, "Great, Brian. I'll see you then. And again. Carol's sorry." I cut the call short. Now, I had to be sure to find a new place to live and move out by 7 o'clock Wednesday night. I took another shower, ate some white bread toast so it would stay in my stomach and not beg for it back, and went to the phone. By 10 p.m. that evening, I had rented a small storage room, and it held most of the things I wanted to keep from our marriage, including no wedding photos, or any photos of Carol at all. I also had permission to use one of the apartments my company rented to visiting clients between Wednesday and Sunday, which would give me plenty of time to find a new place to live. Of course, I never cleaned up anything at the scene of the affair, including my vomited clothes, but I left everything as it was after I threw up on Jeremy and Carol. I went to work on Tuesday, and although physically I had mostly recovered, emotionally I was at a complete loss. However, my hard-ass female boss, though really kind at heart, figuratively put her boot up my ass, so I was surprisingly productive. On Wednesday, I took half a day off to move the rest of my stuff and leave my wedding ring on the kitchen table in my old apartment, and to meet with a real estate agent who specialized in apartments. She promised to show me a few apartments on Saturday and guaranteed she could find me a suitable new place to live by the end of the day. I turned off my cell phone around 5 o'clock Wednesday night, went to the gym and worked out for 2 hours, pumping more iron per session than I ever had before, fantasizing that every lift was a kick in Jeremy's balls or Carol's face. After my workout, I stopped by the diner for a light dinner. When I got to my company apartment at 9:30, just for fun, I checked my cell phone. 4 missed calls from Tiffany. I laughed and deleted the messages without listening to them. I had an appointment with a divorce attorney on Monday. Long story short, I was divorced within 6 months, and I never had to see Carol again because the shark I hired was able to avoid court-ordered marriage counseling sessions by claiming I was in therapy, which, as far as my lawyer knew, was true. However, my therapy was not with a counselor. In fact, my therapy consisted of picking up harlots in bars almost every Saturday night and sleeping with them. Although I was still mostly devastated inside after my experience with Carol, the one-night stands were physically satisfying, but not worth a dime for my emotional healing. By the time I'd been divorced as long as I'd been married, my 28-year-old ass had a number of advantages. First, although I had always been in good physical shape, I had become a real gym fanatic. I had 6 dice and the ability to bench press almost twice my 85-pound weight. I watched my diet and felt better, physically, than I ever had in my life. Second, I didn't have much of a personal life except for one-night stands, and in a job that was well-suited to my talents, I progressed further and faster than anyone else in the history of the large company I worked for. In fact, almost 3 years after my divorce was final, I had a 6-figure bonus and was on top of the world. Third, because I wasn't tied to my job, I didn't mind business travel and was able to see many interesting places, and when my schedule allowed it, I would stay for a day or two after business was over to enjoy the city I was traveling to. On these business trips, I sometimes used the services of call girls who were usually better fun for one night. Since I was just living at home and had a great expense account and compensation, hiring call girls was not a financial problem. I clearly wasn't ready for a relationship. I kept in touch with Ken by phone and email over the years. He expressed condolences for my divorce, but in retrospect, his comments denigrating Carol were a bit harsher than they should have been since he didn't see Carol except for the week before and at the wedding. A year after my divorce, Ken married Audrey. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend, but it was absolutely necessary for me to be on a business trip to Amsterdam at the time. I sent him and his wife an expensive watch with "Happily Ever After" inscribed on it and an engagement photo imprinted on it, which he said they loved very much. I had never seen Audrey in person, but she looked like a fox in the photograph, although I thought her curly blonde hair and excessive makeup somewhat spoiled her appearance. Shortly after I received my 6-figure bonus, I had a business trip to a town in the capital region where Ken and Audrey lived. However, following Murphy's Law, Ken himself was on a business trip for the first 3 days of my trip. However, he would be back in town on the last day of my business trip, and the day I would extend my trip. We agreed to meet at his house for dinner on Friday night that week, and for me to spend the day with him and Audrey on Saturday before flying home on Sunday. I arrived in Ken's metropolitan area early Monday afternoon before my first business meeting Tuesday morning. It had been a long time since I had entertained, and I expected the area to have top-notch call girls, since there were several million people living there. The doorman, Tim, at the fancy hotel I was staying at was particularly friendly, and we struck up a conversation. I love chatting with real locals in any place I visit. I arrived at the wrong time, and we actually chatted for about 10 minutes. At the end, he said, with a smile, "If you need any friendly companionship during your stay, at a business dinner or something, let me know." I was pretty sure I knew what that meant. I saw Tim the next morning and was candid with him. "Tim, I would love to have a loving companion. Do you have any suggestions?" I winked at him and slipped him a $50 bill. When he saw the face of Ulysses S. Grant looking back at him, a faint smile appeared on his face. He pulled out a card with the name Kitty on it and a phone number printed in flowery script and nothing else. She is married, part-time, independent, and the only one I can really recommend. If she is unavailable, I can give you the numbers of local escort services. I thanked him and got into the cab he hailed for me. I didn't waste any time. With a 15-minute drive to my meeting place, I arranged to meet Kitty at my hotel for drinks at 8 p.m., and, if we were both agreeable, maybe have a nice time afterward. She was expensive, $1,000 a night. But since I had the opportunity to socialize with her for a couple drinks and a $100 appearance fee before making a decision, I was okay with it. Kitty was unlike any call girl I'd used before. Her shiny dark hair was slicked back, and with the exception of barely visible lipstick, she wasn't wearing any makeup. Also, her dress was completely discreet. I recognized her immediately by the white carnation above her lush left breast. Despite the conservative nature of her dress, it did not hide her magnificent figure. I walked up to her and introduced myself as John Smith, the assumed name I had given her on the phone, which she obviously knew was fake, and we sat down at a table in the hotel bar. Kitty was attractive, and within 5 minutes I realized she had that factor. While her beauty probably rated a 9 on a 10-point scale, her sexuality was off the charts. Within 20 minutes, I shoved $900 in cash under her desk. I gave her a $100 bill the first time I shook her hand. The hotel gym had lockers controlled by guest-determined codes, and she had put her purse and its contents in the locker, having first discreetly taken 3 condoms out of it. I grinned to myself. I wonder what she expected me to do. The most condom sex I'd ever had in a night was 2. Without a rubber, though, my record was 4. Before she put her cell phone in her locker, she told me she needed to make a private phone call. I assumed her husband, based on what Tim had told me, though we didn't talk about her marriage when we were drinking. I gave her my room key card and went upstairs to 924. Kitty arrived at 924 15 minutes after me. I was in boxers, with a drink from the minibar in my hand and another on the table for her. She smiled, took a sip of her drink, and then immediately shed her clothes and unraveled her hair. Naked, she was possibly the sexiest woman I had ever seen in my life. She imprinted a kiss on my lips. Some call girls don't kiss, but her kiss was passionate. Then she recommended a shower while she pulled off my boxers and giggled. "Good aspect ratio. I'm going to have fun." It was hard not to do it in the shower, but she deftly kept me under control, giving me unrestricted access to her stunning but firm breasts. A weighty addition to her recognizable virtues was the conversation in bed after she got off me. Her conversation in bed wasn't heavy. It was fun and interesting at the same time. I probably enjoyed it more than any other bedtime conversation in my entire life. After by far the 2 best condom hours of my life, she fell asleep in my arms. I came off one more time, remembering the condom again, in the middle of the night, the first time I had my 3rd condom sex. The one in the spoon position in the middle of the night was even better than the first 2. Hard to believe, but it was true. The next morning, we had a good laugh at breakfast. She was gorging on blueberry pancakes like she was a truck driver who'd been on the road for 12 straight hours. My teasing about it made her smile mischievously. "Great sex always makes me hungry," she grinned before filling her mouth with another bite. I liked Kitty so much that I did something unprecedented. I asked her to do it again that evening. "If you take me out to dinner and dancing, I'll only charge you $500, she giggled. I really enjoyed last night. "It's a deal," I replied quickly. "You can come over at 6:30 p.m. and make reservations at any restaurant you want." I received a passionate kiss goodbye. My Wednesday night dinner and dance date went as well as it could have. By 7 p.m., I no longer remembered that I was with a married call girl. It was almost like a romantic date. After 3 more impressive times in condoms that night, I could barely remember my name. Sure enough, at breakfast Thursday morning, I asked her if she could do Thursday night again. "Yes, but first we have to discuss the problem." "Okay," I said expectantly. "I'd love to sleep together tonight without a rubber, but we have to have a certain level of trust. I've never done it with John before, and I'm sure you're uncomfortable with it since I'm a call girl. I don't know if you'll believe me when I tell you I'm 100% clean, but I trust you. and I'll believe you if you say I am. My emotions were screaming yes while my brain was saying no. I don't know what I would have done if she hadn't pulled my tie to bring my head closer to hers and whispered in my ear, "I guarantee heaven." "Okay," I obediently replied. Sweat was already glistening on my forehead at the thought of it. "Let's have a quick dinner, watch a short movie, and then get down to business," she smiled. That's what we did. Only we didn't finish the whole movie, so after only 45 minutes, I can't tell you what the movie was about, we were catching a cab. Thursday night was one that I thought I could only dream of, not one that would actually become a reality. Kitty outdid herself. She took things to a new level. When I woke up the morning after, I was beyond ecstatic. At breakfast on Friday morning, however, I was in shock. This was the first woman since my divorce that I wanted a long-term relationship with, and she was not only married, but a call girl. Again, though, I didn't think about either of those two things as we tried to transform to the point of passing out last night. Kitty also seemed to be in a pensive state of mind. After about 10 minutes of silence over breakfast, she moaned, "I wish it could go on like this for a few months. Unfortunately, my husband will be home tonight and I'll have to turn into Susie's housewife." "Kitty, I could fall in love with you." It spontaneously came off my lips, straight from my heart, before I realized I was about to say it or could stop it. When I said it, an unhappy expression appeared on her face, and then she seemed to come to her senses and tearfully mumbled, "Please don't call me if you come back to town. My life is too complicated as it is." Then she abruptly got up and walked away, leaving 2 pancakes on her plate. Despite my anxiety and self-pity, I was a tiger at the final meetings on Friday, and by the time I left for Ken's house around 5 o'clock, I had accomplished everything I wanted to during the trip. When I reported to my supervisor, the same one who, figuratively speaking, had given me a kick in the ass when I'd caught Carol cheating. Every time she was promoted, I did it too. She was thrilled. "Spend your bonus night or two with the company," were her last encouraging words. By the time the cab dropped me off at their 3-bedroom Gothic-style country house, I had suppressed my self-pity over the fact that the woman I could have easily loved was out of reach, and was looking forward to meeting Ken and Audrey. Ken greeted me enthusiastically at the door with a manly hug and a pat on the back. "Wow, you look better than I've ever seen you," he blurted out. "I feel better than ever, too," I blurted back. "I'm sorry, but it looks like you could lose a few pounds," I grinned, jabbing my finger at his protruding, though not large, belly. "Audrey cooks too well and I can't get away from the table. Come over and meet her," he said. Fortunately, neither Audrey nor I had anything in our hands, which would have certainly fallen out when we saw each other in the hallway between the kitchen and the hallway. Ken had already relieved me of the 1 5-liter bottle of Magnum wine and the bouquet of flowers I had brought. Audrey was drumroll Kitty. Obviously noticing my sagging jaw, Ken asked, "What's wrong, Brian?" Thinking faster than I ever had in my life, I blurted out, "In the only picture of Audrey I'd ever seen, she had curly blonde hair and thick makeup, but now she had straight brown hair and light makeup. I would never have recognized her. Apparently, Audrey can think too." Because by the time I finished my comment, her expression had changed from shocked to smiling, and she purred, "Well, Ken likes my natural hair color better, and he says I don't need makeup to look adorable." "I have to agree with him," I replied casually, taking her hand and kissing it. Considering the circumstances, dinner went as well as it could have. I was on autopilot, and apparently Audrey was too. It helped that the wine in the bottle of Magnum I brought was Ken's favorite, and he drank almost the entire 1.5 liters. Neither Audrey nor I were interested in getting drunk, for fear of what might come out of our mouths. When Ken was in the bathroom, Audrey came up to me and said, "Please don't tell Ken." I hesitated, then replied, "I'm not sure I can promise that. If I were him, I would want to know." "Let me share some information with you before you make a decision. Give me 5 minutes tonight or tomorrow, and I think you'll have a different perspective," she replied. When I hesitated, she said, "Please, just do a favor for the person you called your best lover in the world in the middle of the night." I didn't remember saying that, but it was certainly true. There had been many times during my intercourse with Kitty Audrey when I had practically gone mad with bliss. Okay, we'll make time to talk. Fortunately, Ken made it easy for us to find time to talk. An hour after dinner, he insisted that I spend the night at his place Friday and Saturday. Audrey convinced him that he was too tired to drive and that she would drive me to and from the hotel, taking the time to get to know me better. Ken was thrilled with this scenario. As Audrey drove me to the hotel, she didn't hesitate to declare herself right. I'm only telling you this because I'm not in a position to get a divorce right now, and Ken feels very guilty about what he did to you. I'm betraying his trust by telling you. What did you say? I asked, genuinely puzzled. Audrey went into a long explanation of all the details of her story about Ken. It took almost the entire 25-minute drive back to the hotel. The gist of it was that the day after the bachelor and bachelorette party, which was also the day before the wedding, Ken had overheard two of Carol's bridesmaids talking when they didn't know he was around. They were apparently stunned that Carol had screwed a stripper without a rubber at the bachelorette party and then arranged to meet him when she returned from her wedding trip. When Audrey asked why Ken hadn't told me before the wedding, especially since he was well aware that fidelity was important to me, he just brushed her off and said, "It's not my problem, and I didn't want him to kill the messenger." Years later, he felt bad about it, but he swore he would never, ever tell me about it, even during or after my divorce. The details of the story Audrey told fit perfectly with the time, place, and events surrounding my marriage to Carol, and I had no doubt that it was pure truth. It certainly explained why Ken's reaction to Carol had changed shortly before the wedding, and why he had been so insistent on telling me "good riddance" when we talked on the phone while my divorce was pending. As I packed up all my clothes and papers at the hotel and checked out, I thought of nothing else but Brian, Ken, and Audrey's relationship and my past with Carol. If I had known what Ken had done at the time, I would have called off the wedding. It would have saved me from wasting 3 years of my life on that whore. One good thing was that my mind was clear when I slept with Audrey. By the time I got back to Audrey's car, I had decided never to tell Ken about Audrey's side business as Kitty. As soon as I plopped into the passenger seat, I informed Audrey of my decision. This elicited a smile from her and a fervent kiss. By then, I felt comfortable enough with Audrey to ask her about her side business. "Why do you work as a call girl?" I boldly asked her. "You can tell me to mind my own business and I'll never bring it up again, but my mind craves this information like a man in the desert craves water." "I'll tell you," she giggled, and then she did. Like the story of Ken's betrayal of me, this story was long, convoluted, detailed, and nuanced. The bottom line is that Ken effectively sabotaged her career, insisted she be a housewife even though they had no children and he had no intention of having any, contrary to what he told her before they married, and lost much of his libido, all within the first year of their marriage. She worked as a call girl to earn enough money to end the marriage with dignity. Although by the time we got back to their house, I didn't approve of it. At least I understood her point of view. By the time we got inside, Ken had already fallen into a wine-induced sleep. After Audrey left their bedroom with that information, she showed me to the guest bedroom. I blocked the door as she got ready to leave. "I really need something to help me sleep," I grinned. "And Ken isn't himself." "Just sex, and I'm out of here," she giggled, starting to take off her clothes. She actually left my room to go take a shower. On Saturday, the three of us went sightseeing in the city, had lunch at a famous restaurant in the main city park, and generally enjoyed ourselves. Toward evening, Audrey and I went to her health club to work out. Ken had never exercised much, and I was impressed with her routine. After a shower, we headed out for dinner and then drinks. Ken got drunk again, so Audrey and I had some more naked fun in their guest bedroom before she went to bed with Ken. On Sunday, Ken wanted to watch soccer. I was no longer as big an NFL fan as I had been before I came home from the game and found Carol enjoying herself, so Audrey volunteered to drive me to the airport. On the way, we had a frank conversation. "I really like you, Brian," she began the conversation. "Not just the sex, which is by far my best ever, but you're an interesting and funny guy. What do you think?" After a long pause, I decided to be honest. "As I gaff once before, I could fall in love with you. However, I'm going to try to forget you. I don't like the idea of dissolving your marriage to my cousin, despite how meanly he treated me by not informing me of Carol's true character. And while I certainly took advantage of that, I'm not sure I could have gotten past you without you being a call girl. That's fair enough, and I understand. However, I have a lot to think about. I'm divorcing Ken anyway, and I've already lost my taste for being a call girl after my brief affair with you. So I'm quitting. How about we just stay in touch? I'll let you control the pace and nature of our future communication. Is that okay with you, Brian? I didn't have to pause in response to that. Sounds like a plan, I grinned. I would have liked to blow her off, but the memories of having fun with her outside of the bedroom prevented me from doing so. Over the next year, I visited Ken and Audrey's town 3 times, twice on business and once just to see Audrey. I never told Ken I would be in town on any of my visits and only spent time with Audrey. Audrey was so sultry, fun, smart, and interesting that I had a very hard time convincing myself that I wasn't in love with her. Sex with her spoiled me for other women. And for the entire next year, the only time I had sex with anyone but her was when I was depressed after a phone call with her and picked up a slut at a bar who looked something like her. It had been about 380 days, not that I was counting, since I first met Audrey when the receptionist in the main lobby of our building called around 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. There's a female visitor to see you. She says her name is Kitty. Should I send her upstairs? What the hell? Went through my head. I must have been speechless for a long time because the receptionist asked, "Are you here, Mr. Davidson?" I replied, "Oh, I'm sorry, Monique. I'll be right down to escort her upstairs." Since we were in a public place, Audrey and I didn't kiss when I met her in the lobby, but we gave each other a quick hug. "What brings you to town, Audrey?" I asked as we rode the elevator up to my office. "I have some news I want to share with you and then have a serious talk about our relationship," she smiled. "I'll show you my office and introduce you to my boss. Then at 5:30 p.m. or so we can go out to dinner and then we can talk at my apartment. How does that sound? We can also deliver your luggage to my apartment." "Great. And I won't stop you from doing the work you need to do. But I hope you won't mind if I stay for the weekend," she replied. We waited until dinner was over and we took a walk around a nearby small lake before Audrey and I headed to my apartment, and she expressed what was on her mind. She wasn't shy about expressing herself. "Here's a copy of my divorce decree," she said, handing me a paper from the small valise she'd carried with her throughout the day. I looked through it quickly. It was what she was presenting and dated 3 days earlier. As soon as I pulled away from it, she held out several other papers. "This is a sonogram of our baby growing in my belly, a little girl, as well as a prenatal non-invasive DNA test done earlier this week that shows you are her father." I swallowed, looking through those documents. I was about to ask how she got my DNA, but then I realized how ridiculous it was to ask. Those papers, too, turned out to be just what she said they were. Again, as soon as I took my eyes off them, my mouth was suddenly dry, she handed me another document. "This is a proposed prenuptial agreement that states that if we get married, and if I then ever have sex of any kind with anyone other than you, I leave the marriage with only my clothes, jewelry, any car I bring into the marriage, and $5,000. Nothing more. And that I will not contest custody of our child or children." That was over the top, but my mouth was so dry I didn't think I could answer verbally and be understood. So I just read the document. Again, it was exactly as she described. When I looked up again, she continued. "There is no way I can prove with certainty that I stopped being a call girl. However, I have signed an affidavit to that effect that says if you ever prove otherwise that I have had sex with anyone other than you or Ken in the last year, I will pay you $25,000. I also have an affidavit from Tim, the doorman who put you in touch with me, that I told him I was no longer available and that he never gave my name to anyone else in the last year." She held out 2 more sheets. As my mouth went even more dry, I read the 2 affidavits. Again, they were exactly as she had presented them. "Finally, I talked to your mother. I met her at my wedding to Ken and we seemed to hit it off. I have talked to her on the phone or exchanged emails over the years. I didn't tell her much about our relationship, but I did ask her what difficulties she and your father would have if I left Ken and you and I somehow got along. I don't have her affidavit, but you can confirm with her that she doesn't mind, even though it would probably prevent another full family reunion." A tortured smile appeared on her face after that last statement. I don't know what to say." Finally stammering, I squeezed out, "You need time to think. Let's go to bed and you can think about it and share your thoughts with me, however long it takes, maybe even by the end of the weekend. I must warn you, however, that pregnancy seems to have made me more horny than ever before. It's a frightening thought, isn't it?" she said with a wide smile, this time not a fake one. For the rest of the weekend, nothing more was said on any of the issues she raised or the documents she showed me. There were two reasons for this. The first was that she wanted to give me space and time to think without any pressure or argument. The second was that my brain was so full of endorphins, bubbling like the Amazon during the rainy season, that there was little chance of me being able to really think. Since I obviously hadn't had a chance to think things through by Monday, I invited Audrey to stay at my apartment for as long as I could, since I was leaving for work, and to rest up after the last 3 nights, on Monday morning. It took me 2 weeks before I came to a firm decision on the issues Audrey had raised. During that time, Audrey never pressured me at all or even mentioned it. What finally made me decide was the joy of having someone to come home to and share my day with. Of course, there was also the incredibly great sex, but I had convinced myself that having a regular fun life partner was the most important thing. 2 weeks after Audrey's arrival, as we were walking around the same little lake we'd been walking around the first night she arrived, halfway through the walk, I got down on my knee and pulled out my ruby engagement ring. I knew she wanted something completely different than the diamond one she'd given back to Ken after the divorce, and asked her to marry me. She pretended to think it over before answering, but as soon as I started tickling her, she said yes. She signed the prenup she had prepared. I talked to my parents and even my aunt and uncle, Ken's parents, and then we were married in a small ceremony 3 weeks after I proposed. That was 5 years ago, and I added 2 more children, just 2 girls and a boy. Those were the 5 happiest years of my life. My reality that I fell in love with my cousin's wife while she was working part-time as a call girl, after I left my first wife for cheating on me and then eventually entered into a monogamous happy marriage with her, is stranger than fiction. However, I don't think much about it. I'm just enjoying life. We haven't spoken to Ken since we got married. My wife Sue and I recently moved to Millville, but I already regretted my decision. The house we bought was in a nice neighborhood, and the Florida weather was fantastic. Why then did it bother me that we had made a mistake by moving? In the 3 weeks since we moved in, 2 neighbors had been brutally murdered. Before buying, I had taken the time to look up crime statistics in Millville and couldn't find anything that concerned me. There was a murder a few years ago when a jealous husband came home from a business trip and found his wife unconscious in bed. It wasn't too bad, but she was covered in love bites. Next to the bed was the wallet of her husband's coworker. The enraged husband quickly grabbed his .44, drove to his coworker's home, and shot him in a fit of jealousy. Just last year, a man, outraged that a neighbor had run over his expensive bicycle, knocked on his neighbor's door and shot him when he opened it. I could understand a random crime of passion in any city, but the 2 recent murders were quite different. Bonnie Lasky, a middle-aged wife and mother, lived just 2 blocks from our new home. At least she used to live 2 blocks away on Beach Street. She was buried after a casket closing ceremony last week. Her husband found her bloody body in the marital bed when he came home from his night shift. After a short search, Police found her head in the backyard. 2 nights ago, Jack Hurley's neighbors called police because they heard blood-chilling screams coming from his home. When the cops arrived, they had to break down the door because Jack wouldn't open it. When the cops went to the bedroom, Jack let out a few final sobs before dying in front of them. The paramedics who arrived on the scene were unable to save him. This may have been because Jack's insides had been ripped from his body and placed on a pillow next to his head. In both cases, the police searched the neighborhood thoroughly. They even brought in a couple of sniffer dogs, but they came up empty. Several neighbors heard the horrific screams and looked out their windows, waiting for the police to arrive, but no one saw anyone leave Jack Hurley's house. Needless to say, this was very disturbing to me. I decided to install cameras in our house in the interest of safety. I thought about telling Sue about the cameras, but I was afraid she would get even more angry if she knew I was so worried. I could view live video from the cameras installed in every room of my house from my laptop and phone. I hoped this would give me the ability to see any threat before it was too late. I've never been a gun owner, and keeping a gun in the house would definitely upset Sue, so I declined that option. However, I wasn't completely defenseless. A few years ago, a business partner from the Middle East gave me a yataghan. I liked it a lot, so for some reason I started collecting different kinds of swords. Now I had rapiers, palashes, several sabers, a few yataghans, and one saber. The house we moved into was a large Victorian house. It was in excellent condition, and much of it was original. Unlike many Victorian homes I've seen over the years, the owners of this house had never lowered the ceilings, paneled the walls, carpeted the wood walls, or ripped out the wood paneling. We had 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library, living room, kitchen, dining room, and 2 rooms that had no apparent purpose, as well as a large attic. I hung my sword collection on the walls in various rooms throughout the house and spent quite a bit of time memorizing their locations. Sue thought I was just too proud of my collection. Our 2 children were grown and living on their own, so she wasn't worried about the kids playing with the weapons. I placed them high enough to make them inaccessible to small visitors, so Sue allowed me my whimsy. We were young retirees, and renovating the huge house was our main activity. We painted the walls, polished and painted the wood paneling, and threw out a few dilapidated pieces of furniture. I secretly placed cameras in every room. I was pretty sure that Sue would never discover the cameras. I made a habit of reviewing my footage every day to see if anything unusual had happened. The cameras picked up movement and only recorded what was happening in the room. A week after Jack Hurley met his untimely demise, Luke Baker's body was found in his living room, his office, and his bathroom. Rumor had it that a small red object lodged 30 feet away in the oak tree in front of his house was his heart. Our police department called the local fire department to retrieve the object. The firemen just took one look and told the cops that they didn't have a car with a tall ladder, so they would have to climb the tree. Plus, pulling possible body parts out of the tree was not part of their job description. After much debate, the city rented a scissor elevator, and a young patrolman went up on it to retrieve what was in the tree. He put it in the cooler before returning to the sidewalk. A few hours later, I was on the phone with local law enforcement explaining my situation. I recently installed some surveillance cameras in my home and saw something that might be of interest to the police. We're very busy investigating 3 brutal murders in the city. I don't think we have anyone to watch your home movies, was the response of a bored woman answering non-emergency calls to the police department. Your bosses have requested anonymous information that might shed light on these very murders. I think I have it. Send someone to 423 Hickory Street. I'm Bill Macy, and I have information that might interest the police, I insisted. Wait a minute. You gave me your name and address, so it's not anonymous, replied the genius on the other end of the line. I was extremely frustrated by this point, but I managed to keep my cool as I recalled tidbits of information I'd heard about the local Flatfoots. I'll take a dozen jelly donuts and 12 cans of Bud Light with ice. That might interest a few ruminants down there. You're asking for Detective Cook? He's probably watching porn while he waits for his shift to end. I'll pass on your message, the woman promised me. I decided to take a leak while I waited to see if the cops showed up. I was washing my hands when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw an unassuming man in a shiny, badly rumpled suit on the doorstep. Are you really the police? Was my first question. Do you really have donuts and beer? Was his instant answer. It depends, I answered cautiously. Can I see some identification? It depends. The scruffy man objected. Can I have a donut and a beer? Okay, come on in. The donuts and beer are in the kitchen. The guys I met at the local watering hole described you pretty accurately, I admitted. At least they were right about the donuts and beer. I'm still a little skeptical of your crime-solving abilities. Fuck you too! The man smirked, opening a beer with one hand and shoving a donut into his mouth with the other. I'm Detective Cook. I shook off the bits of icing sugar that flew out of Cook's mouth and landed on my forehead and shook his hand, then brushed the jelly off my palm before turning my attention back to Detective Cook. It's a small town and a lot of people are jealous of my deductive reasoning abilities, Cook explained. Could you please let me know what information might help our investigation in solving the recent murders? Answering Cook's question, I pointed to my laptop. I moved into this house about a month ago. Shortly thereafter, the murders began. Are you going to confess? The excited man asked. Damn, I think I've solved another mystery. No, I mumbled. I installed a surveillance system in the house because of all the murders in the neighborhood. I didn't tell my wife, who is shopping now, about buying the cameras. I would appreciate it if you would keep this information to yourself, unless, of course, it leads to the arrest and conviction of the killer. I expect to get 10 grand if it does. I'm afraid we don't pay for anonymous reports, the fat bastard replied without blinking an eye. I see. In that case, consider this a tip from Bill Macy at 423 Hickory Street. Or would you rather not see the possible evidence I have? Is that how you're going to play it? Said Cook with a slight jelly chuckle. Okay, Macy, show me what you got. I opened the laptop and opened the video files. First, I scrolled through a short clip of a dark, beast-like creature emerging from a closet in one of the extra rooms in my house. The next camera captured the same creature as it furtively made its way through my home office. It stopped to cast a brief glance at the calendar on my desk before leaving the room. In the next shot, the same creature came down the stairs, approached the front door, and cautiously opened it. Damn it, Cook exclaimed. Kate Upton? Your wife? You lucky bastard! That's the problem. I've never been in a state like Kate Upton, I replied wistfully. You mean you don't know Kate Upton, but she was naked in your house? What about that big fucking dog? Is that yours? Cook asked. I don't have a fucking dog, but it wasn't a dog. It was Kate Upton, I tried to explain. I may not know much about swimsuit models, but I can tell you this. Kate Upton is not a damn dog, blurted out Cookie. I should have you locked up for that one sentence alone. Watch the video again, I insisted, going back to the first video. If you look closer, you'll notice that the creature coming out of my closet appears to be walking on 2 legs. As it descends the stairs, it gradually morphs into Kate Upton. He looked at her picture on the calendar in my office before he started down the stairs. How the hell is that possible? How is it possible that her breasts haven't sagged? Cook asked, snatching the mouse from my hand and scrolling through the last 10 seconds of the video a few times. We need to look in the damn closet. What kind of shit did you get yourself into? I led the cop upstairs to the closet room where the creature had appeared from. What are those scratches and dents on the floor and wooden walls in this room? The curious detective asked. This room smells like dog shit. Yes, it does. We're working on it, I admitted, pointing to several boxes of baking soda standing around the room, along with air fresheners and a bottle of Febreze. The previous owners wouldn't let us see this room when we looked at the house we were going to buy a few months ago. They kept the door locked, but we could hear the growling and barking of 2 what seemed to be very large dogs. Once we closed on the property and entered the room, we realized why the sellers didn't want us to have access. It smelled much better now than when we bought it. Cook nodded, looking around the room. And what are those big knives on your walls? What are you, some kind of ninja? I collect swords. This is a yataghan forged about 1,500 years ago, I bragged. It's very rare. Whatever you say, Cook muttered, pulling out his gun and slowly opening the closet door. I reached out my hand to turn on the light in the closet at the same time. Cook bounced back and whined. "What the fuck are you doing? I'm all tense with a loaded gun in my hand when you decided to turn on the light when I stuck my head in there. You go first, asshole." With those words, he jerked the door open and pushed me into a 3x10 closet. I had checked it after watching the video, so it didn't bother me. I stepped aside and watched Cook look around carefully. He ran his hand along the wall and stepped to the far corner of the closet. He then placed his hand on the back wall and slowly ran it across the surface, moving closer to me. Suddenly, his hand disappeared into the wall. Cook let out a curse and quickly yanked his hand away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There wasn't a single hole where Cook's hand had been. He looked at his hand and then shifted his gaze back to the wall. Very slowly, he ran his hand along the wall. Again, it disappeared all the way down to his wrist. This time he moved his hand horizontally about 3 feet before his hand made a slight sound, hitting something hard. He then lowered his hand and it bumped into something solid again. He then moved his hand, apparently without a brush, until it reached about 3 feet of wall and again bumped into an obstacle. Cook pulled a felt-tip marker out of his pocket and shook the cap off it. He placed the marker on the wall and carefully moved the marker along the wall just a few inches from the hand he was moving inside the wall. He got to the far side, went down about 3 feet and then back up to me for another 3 feet before moving the marker back on the wall to where he had started marking. Suddenly, he gave a startled shriek and quickly pulled his hand out of the wall. Blood was oozing from a cut on the back of his previously invisible hand. "I think one of those bastards clawed me or something," the burly detective said too calmly. "What bastards? Where did your arm go? How did you manage to punch through the wall so easily? What the hell is going on?" I asked, a little nervously. "I could be wrong, but it looks like you have a closet with a portal to a parallel universe," Cook replied. "It's too early to say for sure, but it's entirely possible that the creature that came out of here is our killer." "That doesn't make any sense," I protested. "I've never heard of a parallel universe. Is it from outer space or something? It could be from some planet light years away, but I suspect it's a portal to another dimension. Scientists have been arguing about the existence of other dimensions for years. String theory allows for 11 dimensions, Cook explained. "Where the hell is the guy who ate my donuts and drank my beer?" I growled. "What are you, a fucking theoretical physicist or something?" "I wish I was. I'm just a fan of the Big Bang Theory," Cook admitted, seeming deeply thoughtful. "I'm going to nail that wall down," I declared. "I'll take 3/4 plywood. Those bastards won't be able to break through it." "No good will come of it," said Cook. "There's a wall there now. Portals to other dimensions can't be blocked like that. They allow passage through solid walls, even concrete walls." "Are you saying walls aren't effective?" I asked. "Try telling that to Hannity. Why the hell haven't those damn things been killing people for years? Why did it start when my wife and I moved? It doesn't make any sense." "I bet the previous owners knew something was wrong here. That's why they locked the big dogs in the next room. Any one of those furry bastards walks into that room when a couple nasty Rottweilers or Dobermans are patrolling, and they're their food. Explain how these furry bastards, as you call them, can turn into Kate Upton," I demanded. "That stunt would be worth billions on the open market." "It's very likely they're werewolves," Cook reasoned. "And what the hell are werewolves, and what do you mean by they? Do you think there's more than one?" Now I was getting really worried. "They're like rats," Cook replied. "If you see one, it means you have an infestation. There's probably a lot more where that hairy bastard came from." "Can I call an exterminator or something? Should I get a couple big nasty dogs? What can I do to keep safe?" I whined. "Don't panic," Cook warned. "We can't be sure this is a portal to a parallel dimension. We don't know if there is more than one bloodthirsty ghoul in your house. We can't even prove that a naked Kate Upton killed that poor lucky Luke Baker." No wonder there was a big smile on what was left of his face. "He died with a smile?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, can you think of a better reason? What would you do if a naked Kate Upton appeared in your bedroom?" "Well, I'd have to feel those amazing breasts. Probably play with... That was all I had time to do before Cook interrupted my daydreams. Exactly. You'd be grinning from ear to ear. If she ripped half your face off, it'd be a crooked grin, just like Baker glued what was left of his mug. You're just making me feel a little better, Detective. I live in a house where demons come out of my closet. What am I supposed to do? We need to make a plan, Cook said firmly. I suggest you keep the closet door locked, just like the door to this room. It won't stop the ugly bastards, but it should slow them down. Plus, the noise they make breaking down the door should alert you in time to run like hell. You're a real fucking piece of work, I growled. I go to the police to keep me safe from those damn werewolves, and you tell me to run like hell? That's your plan? You could try putting pictures of Don Knotts and Pee Wee Herman in a prominent place, Cook suggested. You could kick their asses. Is this a goddamn joke? I asked angrily. No, I thought it was a damn good idea, objected the enigmatic Detective Cook. Likewise, avoid pictures of The Rock, Chuck Norris, Clint Eastwood, and my personal favorite, John Wayne. I can see how that idea makes some sense, I reluctantly admitted. Any other brilliant suggestions? Could you make it so I could see your security system in real time? I could follow him and rush over here if it looks like another spawn of Satan has shown up. Yes, I can share the video with you on the cloud. I'll give you access and you can watch the video and see the action in real time. That's a surprisingly good idea. Detective Cook hung around for a few more minutes discussing various ways to catch werewolves before they killed anyone else like Sue and me. He took my last 2 beers and the donut I was saving for Sue as he left. While waiting for Sue to return, I Googled some notable people and printed out their pictures. First, I went with Don Knotts and Pee Wee Herman, and then I went with Joe Pesci, Danny DeVito, and Woody Allen. I pinned the photos to the wall of my office. I admitted to myself that I was grasping at straws. Now that I knew there were murderous demons rampaging through the house, it wasn't easy to act normal around Sue. It was likely that she would overreact to this information and want to sell the house. If we sold it, we'd take a big financial hit and our retirement plans would go down the drain. If Cook and I could figure out how to keep those bastards from coming through the wall, or if we could domesticate the damn things, we'd be fine. 2 days later, while standing in line at Home Depot for paint, I decided to check my phone to see if anything was going on at home. I started to get a little excited when I saw Sue walk into our bedroom naked. She was still a beautiful woman of about 45. Her breasts were high and firm, and her ass was perfectly rounded. I was admiring her body when a man entered the room to join her. I was stunned and only slowly began to realize what I was seeing. It was me in the room with Sue. I checked my phone to make sure I wasn't watching an old video, but to my horror, it was happening in real time. I saw Sue fall to her knees in front of me. Yes, it had to be a werewolf. I dropped the paint I was holding in my hand and ran to my car. Breaking the speed limit the whole way, it still took me 10 minutes to get home. I rushed inside, grabbed my favorite yataghan off the living room wall, and ran up the stairs as quietly as possible. The door to the bedroom was open, so I just walked in and picked up my yataghan. I hesitated as I watched Sue and my double come to the finish line. What if it was a person who was a clone or a twin with Sue? He definitely looked human. Hell, he looked exactly like me, only with a flatter belly. If it was really a man, I'd commit murder. If it was really me, I'd kill myself. I was out of my mind, literally. My decision was made for me when Sue let out a loud groan and seemed to pass out. I loosened my grip on Sue's hips and she fell forward, clearly comatose. And then it happened. I watched as hair began to grow on my ass and back. It wasn't me. The transformation happened surprisingly quickly. Within seconds, I was already watching a dark, hairy, beast-like creature pulling long claws out of its hands or paws or whatever it was. It was preparing to strip my emotionless wife on her ass. My razor-sharp yataghan swung down and sliced the demonic bastard in half. When both parts of his body hit the floor, they turned into piles of ashes, and quite small ones at that. I was shaking at the thought of how close Sue was to becoming another victim. I was upset that she had slept so willingly and well with a werewolf, but how could I blame her? He was just a slightly better version of me. at least when it came to sex. I wondered if I'd ever be able to satisfy Sue again. She never passed out when we made love, but she lay there smiling like a cat that got the cream after that demonic bastard finished having her. It was the one time I outdid myself, literally. My phone chirped, and I slowly picked it up. Jesus! That was really close! For a second there, I thought you were going to let that bastard rip your wife apart. Did you see that, Cook? Did you see how quickly he reverted back to his original form and how he was going to tear Sue apart? I asked, somehow feeling relieved that Cook had shared that experience with me, even if only indirectly. I saw it all! Did I just watch Bill 2.0 have your wife in a coma? Are your wife's breasts really that firm, or was it some kind of spell or magic? You're missing the real situation, I shouted. My wife was fucked and almost killed by a damn demon from a parallel universe. Yeah, you're right, Cook admitted. Now I know how they work. Your wife has the same goddamn smirk that Jack Hurley had on what's left of his face. So what are you going to do about it? I demanded an answer. You can't arrest these bastards. You can't even catch them. Actually, we did have one arrested. Cook grinned. It seems Marcia Terrell was attacked last night. She lives a block away from you on the same street. She was in her bedroom talking to her husband on the phone when Don Knotts walked into her room, wearing nothing but a wide grin and flaunting an impressive erection for such a skinny guy. Marcia teaches some kind of martial arts class at IMCA. Needless to say, she was kicking the little guy's ass all over the room. Her husband called the cops while she was pounding the poor little bastard. When the cops arrived, he was unconscious. He was shape-shifting while they handcuffed him. No one knew whether to take him to the vet or the doctor. You said you had one in custody, which leads me to believe you don't have him anymore, I remarked. Did he kill the cops and escape? No, he turned into a little pile of ashes in Marcia's bedroom before they could move him. I think he died in prison. It usually takes a lot of paperwork, but we decided to pretend it never happened. Marcia was fine with that. She gave the boys a bag for the ashes. She didn't feel like explaining how she'd knocked one of America's favorite television personalities out of her mind. I'll be getting one of those camera drones later this week. I'll take it through your wall into a parallel dimension to determine the best way to deal with these illegal aliens or whatever they are. Just hold out a few more days and it'll be over. Seeing Sue stirring, I hung up the phone and walked over to her. How are you feeling? You fucked me senseless. I feel great. We'll just have to wait a few days to try again. I need to recover, my loving wife replied, kissing me with a deep kiss with lots of tongue. That was just great. I gave Sue the best sex of her life and just watched. It occurred to me that a recording of this session would be quite interesting. I would have to watch it quite a few times to recognize every move I made in this epic affair. There was no way I could fully get used to the fact that Sue had been fucked like hell by a guy who seemed to be me, but wasn't. I felt it weighing on me somehow, and it annoyed me, at least until I got home from Home Depot the next day. I was back in line at the register with the paint I had tried to buy the day before. I decided to check my phone again. And again, I saw something amazing. Our neighbor, Agnes Murdoch, was a well-preserved widow in her 50s. She was nice enough to us, except that she was always preaching religion and warning of all the terrible things that could happen to us sinners. Sue thought she was harmless and meant no harm by her rants, but I tried to avoid this woman. Why was Agnes sneaking down the hallway from our spare bedroom to the bathroom completely naked? Then I realized it was another damn werewolf. He must have looked out the window and seen Agnes doing something in the backyard and decided to take her form, only he had bigger breasts and a rounder ass than Agnes. I knew Sue was away for the day visiting her family, so she was safe, but it was still a dangerous situation. I hurried home and grabbed my trusty yataghan, which I put back in the holder in the living room. I was beginning to love this gift more and more. I silently climbed the stairs and crept down the hallway with my yataghan raised, ready to strike. Just as I reached the bathroom door, Agnes entered the hallway. She was wiping her hair with a towel. She was completely naked, and I had a chance to study her body. It was pretty damn obvious she was a werewolf. I raised the yataghan higher and tensed my nerves, studying the area of her neck where my blade would enter. Death would be swift and merciful. The problem with my plan was how human she looked. I couldn't kill myself when I slept with Sue because I looked so human and so much like myself. It wasn't until I started to turn into a monster and became a clear threat to Sue that I decided to swing my blade. I felt like I should do the same to Agnes. I couldn't chop to pieces what looked like a real person, but if I could make her turn back into a bloodthirsty beast, I wouldn't have such qualms. With the end of the blade, I pulled the towel off her head and tossed it aside. Agnes fumbled for the towel and started to turn her head to look for it. Then she saw me standing next to her, raising my saber threateningly. She gasped and trembled. Scared? I grinned as a plan formulated in my head. I know why you're here. You want hot sex and a big orgasm before you change your clothes again and eat me, don't you, bitch? Get your enlarged ass into that room and get on all fours on the bed. I'm going to fuck you like the animal you are. Saying that, I reached out and squeezed her breasts a few times. I pulled her and gestured to invite her into the bedroom. Agnes was still trembling when I nodded, indicating that I wanted her on the bed. She nervously climbed on it and leaned forward, presenting me with a truly wonderful ass. I realized that these werewolves knew how to seduce a man. I'd seen my wife defiled by a bastard like me, and I knew what demons liked sexually. They wanted it hard, fast, and rough, so I gave it to Agnes. The bitch loved it. I could see that she was close to a really strong finish. She seemed to have some serious little problems that were building up in intensity. I was starting to worry that I would explode before she did and pass out first. I was having the best sex of my life with a goddamn monster from another universe. I was about to explode like I had never exploded before. I had to hold out long enough to get Agnes off, see her turn back into an ugly fucking monster, and then chop her prim head off. Suddenly, the bitch started letting out an almost soundless scream. I'd never heard anything like it before. She pushed back hard. She started to shudder and then collapsed. It was the most incredible feeling I had ever experienced. Then I lost consciousness. Startled, I woke up. I was still alive. I was grateful to him for that. The werewolf had decided not to kill me. Maybe I had fucked him better than I ever had before and was going to let me live so I could sleep with him again. If that was the case, I was more determined to stay conscious long enough to separate his head from his body. Agnes was with me. The strangest thing was that she was still human. You said I should eat you after you fucked me like an animal, Agnes said with a smile. I hope I'm doing as well as you wanted. I don't think I can handle another sex like the last one for a few days. Oh, okay, was all I could utter, trying to make sense of everything. Agnes was still in human form. That's when I realized she was talking to me. I didn't know if werewolves could talk. Best laid plans and all that. It wasn't long and she talked me into another one. It was so nice of you and Sue to offer to let me stay with you while my house was being fumigated. Those termites were becoming a real problem. I have a question for you. Was this with Sue's knowledge and permission, or have you been a very bad boy? I thought you were someone else. I mean, I didn't think you were really you. I had to find out if you were you, I blurted out, trying to explain the situation. I didn't think you had such a nice ass and those breasts were bigger and firmer than you. I see. You thought I must be someone else because my ass was so beautiful and my boobs were bigger and firmer than you thought. The only way to make sure I was me was to blow your brains out. Is that what you mean? Agnes asked, smiling broadly. That's right, I admitted. I have a feeling that Sue doesn't know about your decision to check my identity so thoroughly. Is that true? Well, she didn't say anything to me about you staying here, so she can't blame me for having doubts, I reasoned. Don't you think Sue would think that doubting is one thing, but having me the hell out of here is another? Do you think she'd be upset if we told her about it? Agnes asked with a silly smile. There's no reason to tell Sue about my little mistake. Heck, she made the same mistake, but she doesn't know about it. Let's keep this between us if you don't mind, I practically begged. I think we'll work something out. Every once in a while, I'll expect you to come to my house and check out my ass and breasts to make sure I'm really me. In exchange, I will never again preach to you or mention to Sue that you are having some sort of identity crisis that involves checking my ass, my breasts, and sexing me senseless. Do we have a deal? Okay, we have a deal, I replied with a smile. Who knew a prim, preachy bitch would have ass and breasts to die for? In my defense, most men in my position would have made the same mistake. I went to my bedroom to take a shower before Sue got home. I was brushing my hair when she came in and gave me a hug. "Hi, Stallion. I'll be ready for another round of this incredible lovemaking in a few days, but we have to make sure Agnes gets home so she doesn't hear us. That would be awkward." "Why didn't you tell me she was staying here for a day or two?" I asked. "I told you yesterday at dinner. You've been so busy lately that you don't listen to what I say," Sue replied. Later that night, I got a call from Cook. "Are you sure you want me to put an end to these furry killers and close the portal to another dimension? You're getting a hell of a lot of sex because of it. That Agnes has an amazingly beautiful bust, doesn't she? You fucked her like a bloody werewolf. You didn't know it, but I was going to chop your head off if you turned into a demon from hell after you shot the lady. I was at your front door when I saw you both come out with wide smiles, but still in human form, so I went back to the station. You must have watched the video of your wife getting it on from that guy who looked just like you. You fucked Agnes just like you fucked your wife. My porn collection is improving dramatically." "Why did you call, Cook?" I growled. "I want you to get your wife and mistress out of the house tomorrow so I can send a drone into the portal, see what's going on, and find a way to block it. You're getting very sensitive lately," Cook opined. Cook showed up the next day when Sue and Agnes were out shopping. True to his word, he brought the drone with him. He didn't mention that he was bringing explosives. "I'm sending this drone with a hell of a lot of explosives. If I think I can destroy access from that side, I'll blow it up," the detective explained. "Will the damn thing blow up my house too?" I asked nervously. "From what I understand, the explosion will happen either in the other universe or in the universe we're in. Either way, it shouldn't have any effect on your home or our world or even this dimension," Cook answered logically. We stared at the monitor as the drone flew through the wall of my closet into another dimension. It's hard to describe the colors and shapes we saw as Cook rotated the drone so that the camera could catch every detail. We did see some fuzzy bastards watching the drone fly by, and soon some of them took its shape, but apparently they couldn't duplicate the mechanical moving parts as the bastards just sat on the ground without moving. Cook brought the drone closer to the portal. On the other side of it was a wall in some kind of cave. "I'll just slip around the corner and detonate the explosives. That will prevent any flying shrapnel from hitting back through the portal. If I close the entrance to the cave, those bastards won't be able to get to the portal," he reasoned as he hit the enter button on his laptop. The image on the monitor disappeared. The werewolf's head suddenly rolled through the portal and disappeared into the closet. We felt the house shudder slightly, and then everything went quiet. The severed head turned to ash before it stopped rolling. Cook reached out and tapped on the wall inside the square he had drawn with his felt-tip pen not long ago. The wall was solid. The explosion had destroyed the portal. That evening, as Sue and I were getting ready for bed, she turned to me with an impenetrable expression on her face. I still experience some discomfort when I sit up. Today at lunch, I asked for a cushion for the chair. Agnes asked for one too.